Okay, so hi, babe. Yes, I am, demigoddess. I'm sorry, I have not really been here as of late. Um, it's been a heavy past couple of days. Hi, Tink. Tink, no boxes during story time. I'm sorry, but I don't do boxes during story time. Hi, Bailey. No problem, Tink. It's fine. Hi, Halo. No, demigoddess. It's fine. It's just so like yesterday we were exhausted because we were running on 4 hours of sleep. No, you did not tell me that, Tink. So yesterday we were exhausted. We were running on 4 hours of sleep, and I actually did my chores and whatnot. Um, and then so we got plenty of sleep last night. And then today, on our breaks and lunches, I've been doing dishes and laundry and everything like that, getting caught up on everything that we've missed. And then after we got off work, I finished folding and hanging up the laundry, getting that all put away. I cooked dinner. She made cookies. Um, I got all the dishes washed from cookies. Got ate dinner. Talked with the kids, which is why we're late tonight. Um, and then got all the dinner dishes soaking, and then came out here to do story time. And that's been my day. But on the upside, you should see the progress I've made on my game. Babe, why don't you tell them what kind of cookies? So dinner was grilled pork chops with Parmesan potatoes and green beans. That's right, Wolf and Raven. I said Parmesan potatoes. Ah, I see how it is. Okay. So it was purple lemon cookies with white chocolate chips. Nice, Tink. So that's going to be chapter 19. So, media drive, I believe? Yes. Okay, and then come down to Calibri edited. Yep, transfer. Oh, I don't have the Calibri application. Of course, I don't have the Calibri application. Hold, please. Okay, typing in the wrong computer. That helps. Ooh, biscuits and gravy. Well, hi, Bailey. Wild scarecrow. What the fuck is wild scarecrow breath? I don't even know what that shit is. I mean, Well, Wolf and Raven, are you implying that the other people aren't special? Are you implying that you, Wolf and Raven, are the only special one here? Hmm? 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 See, Bailey, this is what happens when we boast. You make other people upset. I will tell you. I will tell you the same thing I tell the children. We do not, I repeat, do not boast. We are never prideful. Hi, Darth, I know. Where have you been hiding? Is my question. So 19. And table of contents. We're going to go to chapter 19. Oh. References. Zoom in? Is there a zoom in? Oy. Okay, well, that'll get bigger once I move it over to the other screen, I'm sure. Okay, so. Give me a second, guys. I am just getting set up. Chapter 27. There we go. Close that. Downloads. There we go. And then yes. Okay. Perfect. I like that so much better. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to move this lovely microphone closer. Okay, are we ready? Who is ready for story time? Oh. I know you are, babe. You're laying in bed. Is Baby Dragon the only one who's ready for story time? Is this on? Okay. So where we left off on Percy Jackson is Luke had challenged Percy to a sword fight and was losing. But right before Luke got to do the killing strike, Charon and his fellow centaurs came in and basically saved their asses. Anyways, now we pick up with them arriving in Long Island. Chapter 19. The chariot race ends with a bang. We arrived in Long Island just after Clarice, thanks to the Centaurs' travel powers. I rode on Chiron's back, but we didn't talk much, especially not about Kronos. I knew it had been difficult for Chiron to tell me. I didn't want to push him with more questions. I mean, I've met plenty of embarrassing parents, but Kronos, the evil Titan Lord who wanted to destroy Western civilization, not the kind of dad you invited to school career day. When we got to camp, the centaurs were anxious to meet Dionysus. They'd heard he threw some really wild parties, but they were disappointed. The wine god was in no mood to celebrate as the whole camp gathered at the top of Half Blood Hill. The camp had been through a hard 2 weeks. The arts and crafts cabin had burned to the ground from an attack by a Draco Ionis, which, as near as I could figure, was Latin for really big lizard with breath that blows stuff up. The big house's rooms were overflowing with wounded. The kids in the Apollo cabin, who were the best healers, had been working overtime performing first aid. Everybody looked wearied and battered as we crowded around Thalia's tree. The moment Clarice draped the golden fleece over the lowest bough, the moonlight seemed to brighten, turning from gray to liquid silver. A cool breeze rustled in the branches and rippled through the grass, all the way into the valley. Everything came into sharper focus. The glow of the fireflies down in the woods, the smell of the strawberry fields, the sound of the waves on the beach. Gradually, the needles on the pine tree started turning from brown to green. Everybody cheered. It was happening slowly, but there could be no doubt. The fleece's magic was seeping into the tree, filling it with new power and expelling the poison. Chiron ordered a 24/7 guard duty on the hilltop, at least until he could find an appropriate monster to protect the fleece. He said he'd place an ad in Olympus Weekly right away. In the meantime, Clarice was carried on her cabin mate's shoulders down to the amphitheater, where she was honored with a laurel wreath and a lot of celebrating around the campfire. Okay, have fun. Nobody gave Annabeth or me a second look. It was as if we'd never left. In a way, I guess that was the best thank you anyone could give us. Because if they'd admitted we'd snuck out of camp to do the quest, they'd have to expel us. And really, I didn't want any more attention. It felt good to just be one of the campers for once. Later that night, as we were roasting marshmallows and listening to the Stoll brothers tell us this ghost story about an evil king who was eaten alive by demonic breakfast pastries. Oh, nice, Wolf and Raven. Nice, Darth, I know. Congratulations, honestly. That is a huge achievement. Clarice shoved me from behind and whispered in my ear, just because you were cool one time, Jackson, don't think you're off the hook with Ares. I'm still waiting for the right opportunity to pulverize you. I gave her a grudging smile. What? She demanded. Nothing, I said. Just good to be home. The next morning, after the party ponies headed back to Florida, Chiron made a surprise announcement. The chariot races would go ahead as scheduled. We'd all figured they were history now that Tantalus was gone, but completing them did feel like the right thing to do, especially now that Chiron was back and the camp was safe. Tyson wasn't too keen on the idea of getting back in a chariot after our first experience, but he was happy to let me team up with Annabeth. I would drive, Annabeth would defend, and Tyson would act as our pit crew. While I worked with the horses, Tyson fixed up Athena's chariot and had a whole bunch of special modifications. We spent the next 2 days training like crazy. Annabeth and I agreed that if we won, the prize of no chores for the rest of the month would be split between our two cabins. Since Athena had more campers, they would get most of the time off, which was fine by me. I didn't care about the prize, I just wanted to win. The night before the race, I stayed late at the stables. I was talking to our horses, giving them one final brushing, when somebody right behind me said, Fine animals, horses. Wish I'd thought of them. A middle aged guy in a postal carrier outfit was leaning against the stable door. He was slim with curly black hair under his white pith helmet, and he had a mailbag slung over his shoulder. Hermes? I stammered. Hello, Percy. Didn't recognize me without my jogging clothes? I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to kneel or buy stamps from him or what. Then it occurred to me why he must be here. Oh, listen, Lord Hermes, about Luke. The god arched his eyebrows. We saw him, all right, I said, but you weren't able to talk sense into him? Well, we kind of tried to kill each other in a duel to the death. I see. You tried the diplomatic approach. I'm really sorry. I mean, you gave us those awesome gifts and everything, and I know you wanted Luke to come back, but he's turned bad. Really bad. He said he feels like you abandoned him. I waited for Hermes to get angry. I figured he'd turn me into a hamster or something, and I did not want to spend any more time as a rodent. Instead, he just sighed. Do you ever feel your father abandoned you, Percy? Oh, man. I wanted to say only a few hundred times a day. I hadn't spoken to Poseidon since last summer. I'd never even been to his underwater palace. And then there was the whole thing with Tyson. No warning, no explanation, just boom, you have a brother. You'd think that deserved a little heads up phone call or something. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Realized I did want recognition for the quest I'd completed, but not from the other campers. I wanted my dad to say something, to notice me. Hermes readjusted the mailbag on his shoulder. Percy, the hardest part about being a god is that you must often act indirectly, especially when it comes to your own children. If we were to intervene every time our children had a problem, Well, that would only create more problems and more resentment. But I believe if you give it some thought, you will see that Poseidon has been paying attention to you. He has answered your prayers. I can only hope that someday Luke may realize the same about me. Whether you feel like you succeeded or not, you reminded Luke who he was. You spoke to him. I tried to kill him. Hermes shrugged. Families are messy. Immortal families are eternally messy. Sometimes the best we can do is to remind each other that we're related, for better or worse, and try to keep the maiming and killing to a minimum. It didn't sound like much of a recipe for the perfect family. Then again, as I thought about my quest, I realized maybe Hermes was right. Poseidon had sent the hippocampi to help us. He'd given me powers over the sea that I'd never known about before. And there was Tyson. Had Poseidon brought us together on purpose? How many times had Tyson saved my life this summer? In the distance, the conch horn sounded, signaling curfew. You should get to bed, Hermes said. I've helped you get into quite enough trouble this summer already. I really only came to make this delivery. A delivery? I am the messenger of the gods, Percy. He took an electronic signature pad from his mailbag and handed it to me. Sign there, please. I picked up the stylus before realizing it was entwined with a pair of tiny green snakes. Ah! I dropped the pad. Ouch! Said George. Really, Percy? Martha scolded. Would you want to be dropped on the floor of a horse stable? Oh, sorry. I didn't much like touching snakes, but I picked up the pad and the stylus again. Martha and George wriggled under my fingers, forming a kind of pencil grip, like the ones my special ed teacher made us use in second grade. Did you bring me a rat? George asked. No, I said. We didn't find any. What about a guinea pig? George, Martha chided. Don't tease the boy. I signed my name and gave the pad back to Hermes. In exchange, he handed me a sea blue envelope. My fingers trembled. Even before I opened it, I could tell it was from my father. I could sense his power in the cool blue paper, as if the envelope itself had been folded out of an ocean wave. Good luck tomorrow, Hermes said. Fine team of horses you have there. Though you'll excuse me if I root for the Hermes cabin. And don't be too discouraged when you read it. Oh, and don't be too discouraged when you read it, dear, Martha told me. He does have your interests at heart. What do you mean? I asked. Don't mind her, George said. And next time, remember, snakes work for tips. Enough, you two, Hermes said. Goodbye, Percy, for now. Small white wings sprouted from his pith helmet. He began to glow, and I knew enough about the gods to avert my eyes before he revealed his true divine form. With a brilliant white flash, he was gone, and I was alone with the horses. Hi, Sapphire Wolf. Hi, Lumi. I stared at the blue envelope in my hands. It was addressed in strong but elegant handwriting that I'd seen once before, on a package Poseidon had sent me last summer. Percy Jackson, care of Camp Half-Blood, Farm Road 3.141, Long Island, New York 11954. An actual letter from my father. Maybe he would tell me I'd done a good job getting the fleece. He'd explain about Tyson or apologize for not talking to me sooner. There were so many things that I wanted to say. I opened the envelope and unfolded the paper. Two simple words were printed in the middle of the page. Brace yourself. The next morning, everybody was buzzing about the chariot race, though they kept glancing nervously towards the sky like they expected to see Stymphalian birds gathering. None did. It was a beautiful summer day with blue sky and plenty of sunshine. The camp had started to look the way it should look. The meadows were green and lush. The white columns gleamed on the Greek buildings. Dryads played happily in the woods. And I was miserable. I'd been lying awake all night thinking about Poseidon's warning. Brace yourself. I mean, he goes to the trouble of writing a letter, and he writes 2 words? Martha the snake had told me not to feel disappointed. Maybe Poseidon had a reason for being so vague. Maybe he didn't know exactly what he was warning me about. But he sensed something big was about to happen. Something that could completely knock me off my feet unless I was prepared. It was hard, but I tried to turn my thoughts to the race. As Annabeth and I drove onto the track, I couldn't help admiring the work Tyson had done on the Athena chariot. The carriage gleamed with bronze reinforcements. The wheels were realigned with magical suspension, so we glided along with hardly a bump. The rigging for the horses was so perfectly balanced that the team turned at the slightest tug of the reins. Tyson had also made us two javelins each with three buttons on the shaft. The first button primed the javelin to explode on impact, releasing razor wire that would tangle and shred an opponent's wheels. The second button produced a blunt but very painful bronze spearhead designed to knock a driver out of his carriage. The third button brought up a grappling hook that could be used to lock onto an enemy's chariot or push it away. I figured we were in pretty good shape for the race. But Tyson still warned me to be careful. The other chariot teams had plenty of tricks up their togas. Here, he said just before the race began. He handed me a wristwatch. There wasn't anything special about it, just a white and silver clock face, a black leather strap. But as soon as I saw it, I realized that this was what I'd seen him tinkering on all summer. I didn't usually like to wear watches. Who cared what time it was? But I couldn't say no to Tyson. Thanks, man. I put it on and found it surprisingly light and comfortable. I could hardly tell I was wearing it. Didn't finish in time for the trip, Tyson mumbled. Sorry. Hey, man, no big deal. Hi, Lieutenant Kitten. I waved to you, but I wanted to let you, sneak in and enjoy some time alone if you didn't want to talk. I was going to let you lurk. If you need protection in race, he advised, hit the button. Ah, okay. I didn't see how keeping time was going to help a whole lot, but I was touched that Tyson was concerned. I promised him I'd remember the watch. And hey, Tyson? He looked at me. I wanted to say, well, I tried to figure out how to apologize for getting embarrassed about him before the quest, for telling everyone he wasn't my real brother. It wasn't easy to find the words. I know what you will tell me, Tyson said, looking ashamed. Poseidon did care for me after all. Well, he sent you to help me. Just what I asked for. I blinked. You asked Poseidon for me? For our friend, Tyson said, twisting his shirt in his hands. Young Cyclopes grow up alone on the streets, learning to make things out of the scraps. Learn to survive. But that's so cruel. He shook his head earnestly. Makes us appreciate blessings, not be greedy and mean and fat like Polyphemus. But I got scared. Monsters chased me so much, clawed me sometimes. The scars on your back? A tear welled in his eye. Sphinx on 72nd Street. Big bully. I prayed to Daddy for help. Soon the people at Merriweather found me. Met you. Biggest blessing ever. Sorry I said Poseidon was mean. He sent me a brother. I stared at the watch that Tyson had made me. Percy, Annabeth called me. Come on. Chiron was at the starting line, ready to blow the conch. Tyson, I said. Go, Tyson said. You will win. Yeah. Okay, big guy. We'll win this one for you. I climbed on board the chariot and got into position just as Chiron blew the starting signal. The horses knew what to do. We shot down the track so fast, I would have fallen out if my arms hadn't been wrapped in the leather reins. Annabeth held on tight to the rail. The wheels glided beautifully. We took the first turn a full chariot length ahead of Clarice, who was busy trying to fight off a javelin attack from the Stoll brothers in the Hermes chariot. We've got him, I yelled, but I spoke too soon. Incoming, Annabeth yelled. She threw her first javelin in grappling hook mode, knocking away a lead-weighted net that would have entangled us both. Apollo's chariot had come up on our flank. Before Annabeth could rearm herself, the Apollo warrior threw a javelin into our right wheel. The javelin shattered, but not before snapping some of our spokes. Our chariot lurched and wobbled. I was sure the wheel would collapse altogether, but we somehow kept going. I urged the horses to keep up speed. We were now neck and neck with Apollo. Hephaestus was coming up close behind. Ares and Hermes were falling behind, riding side by side as Clarice went sword on javelin with Connor Stoll. If we took one more hit to our wheel, I knew we would capsize. You're mine, the driver from Apollo yelled. He was a first-year camper. I didn't remember his name, but he sure was confident. Yeah, right, Annabeth yelled back. She picked up her second javelin. A real risk considering we still had one full lap to go, and threw it at the Apollo driver. Her aim was perfect. Thank you, Bailey. The javelin grew a heavy spear point just as it caught the driver in the chest, knocking him against his teammate and sending them both toppling out of their chariot in a backward somersault. The horses felt the reins go slack and went crazy, riding straight for the crowd. Campers scrambled for cover as the horses leapt the corner of the stands and the golden chariot flipped over. The horses galloped back towards their stable, dragging the upside-down chariot behind them. I held our own chariot together through the second turn, despite the groaning of the right wheel. We passed the starting line and thundered into our final lap. The axle creaked and moaned. The wobbling wheel was making us lose speed. Even though the horses were responding to my every command, running like a well-oiled machine, the Hephaestus team was still gaining. Beckendorf grinned as he pressed on his command console. Steel cables shot out of the front of his mechanical horses, wrapping around our back rail. Our chariot shuddered as Beckendorf's winch system started working, pulling us backwards while Beckendorf pulled himself forward. Annabeth cursed and drew her knife. She hacked at the cables, but they were too thick. "Can't cut 'em," she yelled. The Hephaestus chariot was now dangerously close, their horses about to trample us underfoot. "Switch with me," I told Annabeth. "Take the reins." "But trust me." She pulled herself to the front and grabbed the reins. I turned, trying hard to keep my footing in uncapped riptide. I slashed down and the cable snapped like kite string. We lurched forward, but Beckendorf's driver just swung his chariot to our left and pulled up next to us. Beckendorf drew his sword. He slashed at Annabeth and I parried the blade away. We were coming up on the last turn. We'd never make it. I needed to disable the Hephaestus chariot and get it out of the way, but I had to protect Annabeth too. Just because Beckendorf was a nice guy didn't mean he wouldn't send us both to the infirmary if we let our guard down. We were neck and neck now, Clarice coming up from behind, making up for lost time. "See ya, Percy," Beckendorf yelled. "Here's a little parting gift." He threw a leather pouch into our chariot. It stuck to the floor immediately and began billowing green smoke. "Greek fire," Annabeth yelled. I cursed. I'd heard stories about what Greek fire could do. I figured we had maybe 10 seconds before it exploded. "Get rid of it," Annabeth shouted, but I couldn't. Hephaestus' chariot was still alongside, waiting until the last second to make sure their little pleasant present blew up. Beckendorf was keeping me busy with his sword. If I let my guard down long enough to deal with the Greek fire, Annabeth would get sliced and we'd crash anyway. I tried to kick the leather pouch away with my foot, but I couldn't. It was stuck fast. Then I remembered the watch. I didn't know how I could help. "Hey, Uncle Mike." I didn't know how I could help, but I managed to punch the stopwatch button. Instantly, the watch changed. It expanded, the metal rim spiraling outwards like an old-fashioned camera shutter. A leather strap wrapping around my forearm until I was holding a round war shield a meter wide. The inside, soft leather. The outside, polished bronze, engraved with designs I didn't have time to examine. All I knew, Tyson had come through. I raised the shield, and Beckendorf's sword clanged against it. His blade shattered. "What?" he shouted. "How?" He didn't have time to say more because I knocked him in the chest with my new shield and sent him flying out of his chariot, tumbling in the dirt. I was about to use Riptide to slash at the driver when Annabeth yelled, "Percy!" The Greek fire was shooting sparks. I shoved the tip of my sword. I shoved the tip of my sword under the leather pouch and flipped it up like a spatula. The firebomb dislodged and flew into the Hephaestus chariot at the driver's seat. He yelped. In a split second, the driver made the right choice. He dived out of the chariot, which careened away and exploded in green flames. The metal horses seemed to short circuit. They turned and dragged the burning wreckage back towards Clarice and the Stoll brothers, who had to swerve to avoid it. Annabeth pulled the reins for the last turn. I held on, sure we would capsize, but somehow she brought us through and spurred the horses across the finish line. The crowd roared. Once the chariot stopped, our friends mobbed us. They started chanting our names, but Annabeth yelled over the noise, "Hold up, listen, it wasn't just us." The crowd didn't want to be quiet, but Annabeth made herself heard. "We couldn't have done it without somebody else. We couldn't have won this race or got the fleece or saved Grover or anything. We owe our lives to Tyson, Percy's brother," I said, loud enough for everybody to hear. Tyson, my baby brother. Tyson blushed. The crowd cheered. Beth planted a kiss on my cheek. The roaring got a lot louder after that. The entire Athena cabin lifted me and Annabeth and Tyson onto their shoulders and carried us towards the winner's platform, where Chiron was waiting to bestow the laurel wreaths. That is the end of chapter 19. And next is tomorrow night is chapter 20, where everything goes to shit. Okay, it doesn't really go to shit, but you know. Babe, what are you doing up? Lumi, Sapphire Wolf, how are you two doing? Well, of course. I mean, they can't have them not go to shit. I mean, that would be unheard of. Oh, they're amazing. I mean, Rick Riordan really is a good writer. Which one of the other series, Wolf and Raven? Because there's Roman and Greek, then there's Norse, and there's Egyptian. Bailey, have fun. Well, Lumi, isn't it almost time for bed? Sapphire Wolf, I'm good. We were busy today, but I'm good. Wow, Wolf and Raven. Okay, Wolf and Raven, let me explain something to you. You're in a room full of curious people. No. You spoiled without spoiling. Because you put Blank's brother. You didn't have to put that it was someone's brother, because now they're going to Google. Which means they'll Google and they'll find out on their own. But they didn't technically find out from you, so it's not spoiling. You could just say, I want to read the Magnus series. Wolf and Raven, don't make me mute you. I get that, Lumi, and you need to take care of yourself. Now, that is the end of Percy Jackson. Over to Stone of Tears, where, to everybody try and contain your excitement, we finally figure out what's going on with Kaylin. Hey, Nyad, how are you? Everybody likes Kaylin. Get Lumi, that makes you. No. So, Sapphire Wolf, she didn't give a spoiler. She just put a bunch of stars and then she put brother. So, they're going to be wondering whose brother is in the Norse and Celtic series of Rick Riordan's, which is going to give them the name of who his brother is, which is going to give away other parts of the stories, which basically is her spoiling, but letting other people spoil it for her so she doesn't get the blame. I'm good, Naiad. Been busy, but good. Oh, and Wolf and Raven, BD's not going to care. She's laying down and she's tired. So, we are going to start off with chapter 27. Except for her thumb and forefinger idly turning the smooth, round bone on her necklace, Kaylin stood motionless as she studied the sprawling city. The surrounding rugged slopes seemed to tenderly cradle the buildings that filled nearly the length and breadth of the gentle, rolling valley. Steeply pitched slate roofs pricked the land within the ribbon of wall, with the higher peaks of the palace off to the northern end. But not so much as a wisp of smoke rose from the hundreds of stone chimneys into the clear air. She saw no movements. The arrow straight south road leading to the main gate, the smaller meandering roads that branched off to end at the lesser gates, and those which bypassed the other outer walls altogether to lead north were deserted. The sloping mountain meadow before her lay buried beneath a white winter blanket. A light breeze liberated the burden of snow from a sagging branch of a nearby pine, freeing a sparkling cloud to curl away. The same breeze ruffled the white wolf fur at the thick mantle snugged against her cheek, but she hardly noticed. Pringden and Tossidin had made the mantle for her to keep her warm on their way northeast through the bitter winter storms that raked the bleak land they had traveled. I'm going to be skipping those parts, Wolf and Raven. I think we're going to go back to that. I have not, Lumi, but do me a favor, message me that. And I'll have to find them. Wolves were fearful of people and rarely let themselves be seen, so she knew little of their habits. The brothers' arrows had found their mark where she saw nothing. If she hadn't seen Richard shoot, she would have thought the shots impossible. The brothers were almost as good as he, though she had always held a vague enmity for wolves. She had never actually been harried by them. Since Richard had told her of their close family pacts, she had come to feel an affection for them. She hadn't wanted the two brothers to kill wolves to make the warm cape, but they insisted that it was necessary, and in the end she acquiesced. It had sickened her to watch the carcasses being skinned, revealing the red muscle beneath, and white of bone and sinew, the substance of beings so elegant when filled with life and spirit, so suddenly morbid when left with neither. As the brothers went about the grisly task, she could think only of Brophy, the man she had touched with her power, only to have it prove him innocent. He had been turned to a wolf by her wizard, later to release him from the power of the confessor's magic, so he could start over in a new life. She had wondered at how saddened these wolves' families must have been when they never returned, as she knew Brophy's mate and pack must have been when he was killed. She had seen so much killing. She was weary, nearly to tears of it, at the way it seemed to go on without an end in sight. I'm sorry, I kill wolves every day in my game. So, I mean, At least the three men had felt no pride or joy at having killed the magnificent animals, and had said a prayer to the spirits of their brother wolves, as they had called them. We should not be doing this, Chandlin grumbled. He was leaning on his spear, watching her, she knew, but she didn't take her eyes from the silent city below. The two still seen, his tone was not as sharp as it usually was. It betrayed his awe at seeing a city the size of Amnesia. He had never before been far from the Mud People's lands. He had never seen this many buildings, especially none of such grand scale. When he had first taken in the size of it, his brown eyes had stared in silent wonder he could not conceal, and his acid tongue, for once, had forsaken him. Having lived his whole life in the village out on the plains, it must look to him as if he were seeing the result of magic, not mere human effort. She felt a small pang of sorrow for him and the two brothers, that their simple view of the outside world had to be shattered. Well, they would see more before this journey was ended that would astonish them further. Chandlin, I have spent a great effort, nearly every waking moment, teaching you and Brendan and Tossidon to speak my language. No one where we go will speak yours. It is for your own good that I do this. You are free to believe that I am being spiteful, or that I am doing as you say, as I say, being mindful of your safety outside your land. But either way, you will speak to me in the tongue I have taught you. Hi, Daddy's little girl. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, there's wolves all over the place. You kill them or they kill you. That's how that goes. His tone tightened. But still could not disguise how humbled he was at seeing a great city for the first time. It was far from the greatest he would see. Perhaps, too, it betrayed something she had never before sensed from him: fear. I am to take you to Aidendro, not this place. We should not be using our time at this place. His inflection implied he thought a place such as this could only be evil. Squinting against the blindingly bright sun on white snow, she saw the two figures far below, starting up the slope. She let the round bone slip from her fingers. I'm the Mother Confessor. It's my duty to protect all the people of the Midlands the same way I work to safeguard the Mud People. You'll bring no help to my people, only trouble. His protest seemed more habit than a heartfelt challenge. She answered it in a quiet, tired murmur. Enough, Chandlin. Thankfully, he didn't press the argument, but turned his anger elsewhere. Brendan and Tossidon should not come up the hill in the open like that. I have taught them not to be so stupid. If they were boys, I would strike their bottoms. Anyone can see where they go. Will you do as I say and come out of the open now? She let him shepherd her back into the shroud of trees, not because she thought it necessary, but because she wanted to let him know she respected his efforts to protect her. Despite his animosity at being forced to go on this journey, he had done his duty, watching over her constantly, as had the two brothers, they with smiles and concern, he with a scowl and suspicion. All three made her feel like a precious, fragile cargo that must be tended at all times. The brothers, she knew, were saw his mission only as a task that must be performed, no matter how onerous. We should go quickly from here, he pressed again. Kaelin withdrew a hand from under the fur mantle and pulled a stray strand of her long hair back from her face. It is my duty to know what has happened here. You said your duty was to go to Aidendro, as Richard with the temper asked. Kaelin turned away without answering, moving deeper into the snow-crusted trees. She missed Richard more than she could bear. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face as it had looked when he thought she had betrayed him. She wanted to drop to her knees and let out the scream that seemed to be always there, trapped just below the surface, trying to find a way past her restraint. A scream born of her horror at what she had done. But what else could she have done? If what she had learned was true, and the veil to the underworld was torn, and Richard was in fact the only one who could close it, and if the collar was the only thing that could save his life and give him the chance to close the veil, then she had had no choice. How could she have made any other choice? How could Richard ever respect her if she didn't face her responsibilities to the greater good? The Richard she loved would eventually realize that. He had to. But if any of it was not true, then she had delivered the man she loved into his worst nightmare for nothing. She wondered again if Richard had often looked at the lock of her hair she had given him and thought of her. She hoped that he could find it in himself to understand and forgive her. She wanted so much to tell him how much she loved him. She yearned to hold him to her. She wanted only to get to Aidendrill, to Zed, for help. But she had to know what had happened here. She stiffened her back with resolve. She was the mother confessor. She had intended to skirt Abenicia. But for the last 2 days, they had been coming across the frozen corpses of women. Never any men, only women, from young to old, children to grandmothers. Most were half naked, some without clothes at all. And in the dead of winter, while most had been alone, a few were together, huddled in frozen death, too exhausted or too frightened, or too disorientated to have sought shelter. They had run from Abenicia, not in disorderly haste, but in panic, choosing to freeze to death rather than remain. Most, too, had been badly abused before they had scattered in every direction into the mountainous countryside. Hey, Chef Axel. Kaelin knew what had been done to them, what had made them make the choice they did. The three men knew, too, but none would voice it aloud. She pulled her... How's it going? She pulled her warm mantle tighter around herself. This atrocity couldn't have been at the hands of the armies from Dahara. It was far too recent. The troops from Dahara had been called home. Surely they wouldn't have done this after they had been told the war was ended. Unable to stand for another moment, not knowing what fate had befallen Abenicia, she pushed her bow farther up on her shoulder and started down the hillside. Her leg muscles were at long last used to the wide-footed gait needed to walk on the snowshoes the men had made from willow and sinew. You must not go down there. There could be dangerous. Danger, she corrected, as she hitched her pack up higher. If there was danger, Pryndon and Tossidon would not be out in the open. You may come, or you may wait here, but I'm going down there. Knowing argument was useless, he followed in a rare fit of silence. The bright afternoon sun brought no warmth to the bitterly cold day. There was usually wind at the fringe of the Rakshada Mountains, but thankfully there was little this day. For a change, it hadn't snowed for several days, and they had been able to make better time in the clear weather. Still, with every breath she took, the air felt as if it were turning the inside of her nose to ice. She intercepted Pryndon and Tossidon halfway down the slope. They brought themselves to a halt before her, leaning on their spears, breathing heavily, which was unusual for them, as nothing seemed to tire them. But they were unaccustomed to the altitude. Their faces were pale, and their handsome twin smiles long gone. Please, Mother Confessor, Pryndon said, pausing to catch his breath from the strenuous climb. You must not go to that place. The ancestor spirits of those people have abandoned them. Not true. She puts up with Richards. Kaelin untied a water skin from her waist and pulled it from under her mantle, where her body's heat kept the water from freezing. She held it up to Pryndon, urging him to take a drink before questioning him. What did you see? You didn't go into the city, did you? I told you not to go inside the walls. Pryndon handed the water skin to his panting brother. No. We stay hidden as you told us. We do not go inside, but we do not need to. He licked a drop of water from his lower lip. We see enough from outside. She took back the water skin when Tossidon finished and replaced the stopper. Did you see any people? Tossidon stole a quick glance over his shoulder, down the hill. We see many people. Pryndon wiped his nose on the back of his hand as he looked from his brother to her. Dead people. How many? Dead from what? Hi, Risa. Tossidon tugged loose the thong holding his fur mantle tight at his neck. Dead from fighting. Most are men with weapons, swords and spears and bows. There are more than I know the words to count. I have never seen that many men in my whole life. I have not seen that many men. There has been war here, war and killing of those defeated. Kaelin stared at them for a moment as horror threatened to choke off her breath. She had hoped that somehow the people of Epinicia had escaped, that they had fled. A war. Had the Daharan forces done this after the war was ended, or was it something else? Her muscles at last unlocked and she started down the hill, the mantle billowing open, letting in the icy air. Her heart pounded with dread at what had befallen the people of Epinicia. I must go down there to see what has happened. Please, Mother Confessor, do not go, Brendan called after her. It is bad to see. The three men jumped to follow as she marched down the hill, the slope speeding her effort. I have seen dead people before. They began encountering the sprawled corpses, apparently the sites of skirmishes, a good distance from the city walls. Snow had drifted against them, partially covering them. In one place, a hand reached up from the snow as if the man below were drowning and reaching for air. Most had not been touched by animals or birds, there being an overabundance for scavengers. All were soldiers of the Glean army, frozen in death where they had fallen. Blood-soaked clothes, frozen, rock solid to them, ghastly wounds frozen open. At the south wall, where huge oak doors crisscrossed with iron strapping had stood, was a gaping hole through the stone, its edges melted and burned black. Kaelin stood staring at rock melted like wax from a candle that had guttered. She knew of only one power that could do that: wizard's fire. Her mind fought to understand what she was seeing. She knew what the results of wizard's fire looked like, but there were no more wizards except Zed, and she guessed Richard. But this would not have been Zed's deed. Outside the walls, off to either side, headless corpses were heaped in huge frozen mounds. Heads stared out from less orderly piles of their own. Swords and shields and spears were discarded to separate heaps, looking like great dead steel porcupines. This had been a mass execution, carried out at a number of stations at once to handle the numbers more efficiently. All were Galean soldiers. As she stared in dumb shock at the splayed limbs draped over their fellows under them, Kaelin spoke softly to the three men behind her. The word you did not know to use to count this many is thousand. There are perhaps 5,000 dead men here. Gently, Prindon planted the butt end of his spear in the snow, giving it an uneasy twist. I did not know there was a word needed to count this many men. His fist twisted the spear again, and his voice lowered to a whisper. This will be a bad place when the warm weather comes. It is a bad place now, his brother murmured to himself in his own tongue. Kaelin knew this was the least of the dead. She knew the tactics of defense for Epinicia. The walls were not secure fortifications, the way they had been in times long ago. As the city had grown in the prosperity of the Midlands Alliance, the older, stronger, fortified walls had been torn down, and the stone used to build these newer, more encompassing outer walls. They had been built less secure than in the past. They were more of a symbol of the size and pride of the crown city than a strong defensible perimeter. Under attack, the gates would have been closed, with the toughest, most experienced troops on the outside to stop the attackers before they had a chance to reach the walls. The real defense for Epinicia was the surrounding mountains, whose narrow passes prevented a broad attack. Under Darkenral's order, Daharan forces had laid siege to Epinicia for 2 months. But the defenders outside the walls were able to hold them back in the surrounding passes, pin them down, and harry them relentlessly until the attackers finally withdrew, licking their wounds in search of easier prey. Though the Epinicians had prevailed, it had been at great cost of lives to the defenders. Had Darkenral been less concerned with finding the boxes, he could have sent greater numbers and maybe overrun the defenders in the passes, but he didn't. This time, someone had. These headmen were a part of that outer defensive ring, backs to the wall. They had been defeated and captured and then executed before the walls were breached. Apparently, as a demonstration to those still inside, to terrorize them, to panic them into an ineffectual defense. She knew that what was inside the walls would be worse. The dead women they had been finding told her that much. Out of habit, without even realizing it, she had put on the calm face that showed nothing, the face of a confessor, as her mother had taught her. Brendan, toss it in. I want you two to go around the outside of the walls. I want to know what else is on the outside. I want to know everything about what has happened here. I want to know when this was done, where the attackers came from, and where they went when they were finished. Chandelin and I will go inside. Meet us back here when you are finished. The brothers went quickly at her direction, their heads close together as they whispered to one another while pointing, analyzing tracks and signs they understood with hardly more than a glance. Chandelin walked silently at her side, his bow with an arrow nocked and tensioned to the string at the ready as she stepped over rubble and moved on through the yawning hole. None of the three men had objected to her instructions. They were, she knew, astonished at the size of the city. But more than that, they were overwhelmed at the enormity of what had happened here. They respected her obligation to the dead. Chandelin's eyes ignored the bodies that lay everywhere and watched instead the shaded openings and alleyways among the small daub and wattle houses that were homes to the farmers and sheep herders who worked the land closer to the city. There were no fresh prints in the snow. Nothing alive had been here recently. Kaelin chose the proper streets, and Chandelin stayed close at her right shoulder, half a step behind. She didn't stop to inspect the dead laying everywhere. All looked to have died the same way, killed in a fierce battle. These people were defeated by great numbers, Chandelin said in a quiet tone. Many thousands, as you called it. They had no chance to win. Why do you say that? They are bunched together between the buildings. This is a bad place to have to fight, but in a closed-in place like this, that is the only way. That is the way I would try to defend against a larger number, by blocking the enemy from spreading out behind me to trap me. Greater numbers would not be as much good in the small passageways. I would try to keep the enemy from spreading out and come at them from all sides so that they could not attack as they wished, but must be always in fear of where I would be next. You must not meet the enemy as they wish you to, especially when they greatly outnumber you. These are old men and boys among the soldiers. Boys and old men would not come to fight beside Chandelin unless they saw it was a war to the death, and I was greatly outnumbered. For these men to stand and fight against vastly greater numbers, they must have been brave. Old men and boys would not have come to help such brave men if the enemy were not so great. She knew Chandelin was right. Everyone had seen or heard the executions outside the walls. They knew defeat was death. The bodies were felled like reeds before a great wind as they ascended the rise to where the old city walls had stood. The dead were more numerous. It looked like they had fallen back, trying to make a stand from higher ground. It had done them no good. They had been overrun. All the dead were defenders. None were the corpses of attackers. Kaelin knew that some believed leaving the dead where they fell and defeating an enemy augured ill luck in future battles, and further, that it abandoned their spirits to retribution by the spirits of those defeated. Likewise, they believed that if they left their dead at the site of a defeat, the spirits of their fallen comrades would live on to plague their enemies. Whoever had done this must have believed such and dragged their own dead away from the bodies of those they had vanquished. Kaelin knew of several peoples who believed that the act of battle could bring about such thaumaturgy. That's a word you don't hear very often. One nation, above all, sat at the head of her roster. As they skirted an overturned wagon, its load of firewood spilled in a heap, Chandelin paused beneath a small wooden sign carved with a leafy plant next to a mortar and pestle. With a hand, he shielded his eyes from the sunlight and looked into the long, narrow shop set back a few feet from the buildings to each side. What is this place? Kaelin walked past him, through the splintered doorframe. It's an herb shop. The counter was covered with broken glass jars and dried herbs, all scattered together in a useless mess. Only 2 glass lids remained unbroken among the pale green debris. This is where people went to get herbs and remedies. Behind the counter, the wall cabinet, which reached from floor to ceiling in almost the entire length of the narrow shop, had held hundreds of small wooden drawers, their patina darkened by the countless touches of fingers. The ones still left in place were smashed in with a mace. The drawers and their contents on the floor had been crushed underfoot. Chandlin squatted and pulled open the few drawers near the bottom that had remained untouched, inspecting briefly their stores before sliding each drawer closed again. Nissel would be, how do you say, astonished? Astonished, Caitlin answered. She would be astonished to see this many healing plants. This is a crime to destroy things that help people. She watched him pull open drawers and then slide them closed. A crime, she agreed. He pulled open another drawer and gasped. He squatted motionless for a moment before reverently lifting a bundle of miniature plants, tied at their stems with a bit of string. The tiny, dry leaves were a dusky greenish brown with crimson veining. A low whistle came from between his teeth. Quasendo, he whispered. Kaelin eyed the shadowed back of the shop as her vision adjusted to the darkness. She saw no bodies. The proprietor must have fled before he was killed, or maybe he was one who had stood with the army against the invaders. What is Quasendo? Chandlin turned the bundle over in his palm, his eyes fixed unblinking on it. Quasendo can save your life if you take 10-step poison by mistake, or if you are quick enough when shot by an arrow with the poison on it. How can you take it by mistake? Many poison bandu leaves must be chewed for a long time and made wet in your mouth before being cooked until they become a thick paste. Sometimes, if you swallow some of the wetness in your mouth by accident or chew too long, it can make you sick. He opened a buckskin waist pouch and showed her a small carved bone-lidded box. Inside was a dark paste. This is 10-step poison we put on our arrows. We make it from the bandu. If you ate a very little of this, it would make you sick. If you ate a little more, you would be a long time to die. If you ate more, you would die quick. But no one would eat it after it is made and put in here. He slipped the box of poison back in his pouch. So you could take some of the Quasendo, and it would make you well if you accidentally swallowed some of the bandu when you were chewing its leaves to make the poison? He nodded in answer to her question. But if you're shot with a 10-step arrow, wouldn't you die before you could take the Quasendo? Chandlin turned the bundle of plants in his fingers. Maybe. Sometimes a man will scratch himself with his own 10-step arrow, by not meaning to. And he can take the Quasendo, and he will be well again, if you are shot with a poison arrow. Sometimes you will have time to save yourself. 10-step arrows only work quick if you are shot in the neck. Then you have no time to take the Quasendo. You will die too quick. But if you are shot in another place, maybe your leg, the poison takes longer to work, and you have time to take the Quasendo. What if you aren't near to Nissel, so she could give it to you? You would die if you were out on the plains hunting and you scratched yourself accidentally with a poison arrow. All hunters used to carry a few leaves with them, so they may take it if they scratched themselves or were shot with an arrow and had time. If there is not much poison on the arrow, like if it has not much on it because it is used to hunt small animals, you have longer. In times long ago, when there was war, our men would swallow Quasendo just before a battle, so the enemy's 10-step arrows would not poison them. He shook his head sadly. But this is much trouble to get. The last time we traded for this much, every man in the village had to make 3 bows and 2 fists of arrows, and all the women had to make bowls. It is gone now for a long time, years. The people we traded with have been able to find no more. 2 men have died since we no longer have it. My people would trade much to have this much again. Kaelin stood over him, watching him gently place it back in the drawer. Take it, Chandlin. Give it to your people. They have need of it. He slowly slid the drawer closed. I cannot. It would be wrong to take it from another people, even if they are dead. It does not belong to my people. It belongs to the people here. Kaelin squatted down next to him, pulled open the drawer, and lifted out the little bundle. She found a square of cloth lying on the floor nearby, used for packaging purchases, and wrapped the Quasendo plants in it. Take it, She pushed the bundle into his hand. I know the people of the city. I will repay them for what I have taken. Since I will pay for it, it belongs to me now. Take it. It is my gift for the trouble I have caused your people. He stared at the clock in his hand. It is too valuable for a gift. A gift of such great value would bind us to an obligation to you. Then it is not a gift, but my payment to you and Brendan and Tossidon for guarding me on this journey. You three are risking your lives to protect me. That is a debt I owe you that is greater than this payment. You will owe me no more obligation. With a frown, he studied the bundle a moment, and then bounced it twice in his hand before tucking it in the buckskin pouch at his waist. He tied the flap closed by its rawhide thong and stood. Then this is in trade for what we do. We owe you no obligation beyond this journey. None, she said, sealing the bargain. The two of them walked on through the silent streets, past the shops and inns of the old city quarter. Every door, every window was broken in. Shards of glass sparkled in the sunlight, shimmering tears for the dead. The invading horde had swept through every building, searching out anything alive. How do this many thousands, all living in this one place, find land to feed their families? There could not be enough game to hunt, or fields for all to plant. Kalen tried to see the city through his eyes. It must be a great puzzle to him. They don't all hunt or plant the land. The people who lived here specialized. Specialized? What is this? It means that different people have different jobs. They worked at one thing. They use silver or gold to buy the things they need that they don't grow or make themselves. Where do they get this silver or gold? People who want the thing they specialize in pay for it with silver or gold. And where do these others get this silver or gold? They get it from people who pay them for the things they do. Chandlin looked at her skeptically. Why do they not trade? It would be easier to trade. Well, in a way, it is trading. Often the person who wants what you have has nothing you want. So they give you money, silver or gold, made into flat, round instead. You can use the money to buy things you need. Buy. Chandlin seemed to test the strange word with his tongue as he looked off down a street to their right while shaking his head in disbelief. Why would people work then? Why would they not just go out and get this silver or gold money? Some do. They hunt silver and gold, but that is hard work too. Gold is hard to find and dig out of the ground. That is why it is used for money, because it is rare. If it were easy to find like grains of sand, then no one would take it in trade. If money were easy to get or to make, it would become worthless. And then in the end, this system of trade with worthless money would fail and everyone would starve. He came to a halt with a frown. What is this money made from? What is this silver or gold you speak of? She didn't stop with him, and he had to take a few bounding steps to catch back up with her. Gold is the medallion, the necklace that the Bontoc gave as a gift to the Mud People to show they did not wish to make war. That is made of gold. Chandlin nodded with a knowing grunt. Kalen halted this time. Do you know where the Bontoc got that much gold? Chandlin swept his gaze across the slate rooftops. Of course. They got it from us. Kalen gripped his arm covered with his mantle and pulled him around. What do you mean they got it from you? He tensed at her touch. He didn't like her hand, a confessor's hand, on him. That the fur mantle separated actual contact of flesh was of no consequence. Their flesh was close enough. Even if she released her restraint of the power, that thin piece of hide would be no impediment. Kalen had loosed her power through armor before. She released her grip, and he visibly relaxed. Chandlin, where did the Mud People get that much gold? He looked at her as if she were a child asking where you might find dirt. From holes in the ground in our land to the north, where it is rocky and nothing much will grow or live. There are holes in the ground. They have this gold in them. It is a bad place. The air is hot and bad. It is said that men die if they stay too long in the ground. The yellow metal is in these deep holes. It is too soft to make good weapons, so it is of no use. He dismissed its importance with a wave of his hand. But the Bontoc say their ancestor spirits like the look of the yellow metal, and so we let them come onto our land and go in the holes so they may get it to make things their ancestor spirits may like to look upon when they come to this world. Chandler, others know of these holes in the ground, of the gold that is in them? He shrugged. Not let outsiders come to our land, but I told you, it is too soft to make weapons with, so it is of no use. It pleases the Bontoc, and they are good traders with us, so we let them take what they want. They do not take much, though, because it is a bad place to go into. No one would want to go there except the Bontoc, to please their ancestor spirits. How could she explain it to him? He didn't understand the ways of the outside world. Chandlin, you must never use this gold. He made a face that said he had already explained how useless it was, and no one would want it. You may think it is useless, but others would kill to get it. If people knew you had gold on your land, they would swarm over you to get it. The craving for gold makes men crazy, and they would do anything to get it. They would kill mud people. Chandlin straightened with a smug expression. He took his hand from the bowstring and tapped his chest. I and my men protect our people. We would keep the outsiders away. Kaylin swept her arm around, taking in the hundreds upon hundreds of dead around her. Against this many? Against thousands? Chandlin had never seen this many people. He understood little of the numbers that lived outside his lands. Thousands who would never stop coming until they swept you aside? His eyes followed the arc her arm had taken, his brow wrinkled with the frown of a worry unfamiliar to him, his arrogance evaporating as he took in the dead. Our ancestor spirits have warned us not to speak of the holes in the ground with the bad air. We only let the Bontek go there, no one else. See that it stays that way, she said, or they will come and steal it. That would be wrong. To steal from a people. He put renewed tension to the bowstring as she let out a noisy breath of frustration. If I make a bow to trade, everyone knows it is the work of Chandlin, because it is such a fine bow. If anyone steals it, everyone knows what it is and where it came from, and the thief would be caught and be made to give it back. Maybe he would be sent away from his people. How do these people tell who the money belongs to if it is taken by a thief? Caitlin's mind reeled from the effort of trying to explain such things to Chandlin. At least it was keeping her from having to think about the dead all about her. She started walking again through the snow, having to step over a man's back because there was no way around. They were fallen so close. It is difficult because of this. People guard their money. If anyone is caught stealing, the punishment is severe to discourage thieving. How are thieves punished? They didn't steal much, and they are lucky. They might be locked in a small room until their family can make reparations for what they stole. Locked. What is this? A lock is a way of barring a door. The stone rooms that thieves are placed in have a door they are not able to open from the inside. It has a lock on it. You must have a key, the right key, to open it, so they cannot get out. Chandlin checked the side street beyond a silversmith's shop as they continued up the main road. I would rather be put to death than be locked in a room. If the thief stole from the wrong person or is unlucky, that is what happens to him. Chandlin grunted. She didn't think she was doing a very good job of explaining things to him. He seemed to think the whole scheme unworkable. Our way is better. We make what we want. Everyone makes what they need. This specializing way is not our way. We trade only for a few things. Our way is better. You do the same as these people, Chandlin. You may not realize it, but you do. No, each person knows many things. We teach all our children to know how to do everything they need. You specialize. You're a hunter. More than that, you're a protector to your people. She nodded once again to the dead around her. She stared back with flat eyes. These men were soldiers. They specialized at protecting their people. They gave their lives in trying to protect their people. You're the same as they, a soldier. You're strong. You are good with a bow and a spear, and you are good at discovering and preparing to thwart the various ways others would try to harm your people. Chanelin thought this over a moment as he stopped briefly to knock a heavy clump of snow from the binding of his snowshoe. But that is only me, because I am so strong and wise. Others of my people do not specialize. Everyone specializes, Chanelin. Nissel, the healer, she specializes at helping sick or injured people. She spends most of her time helping others. How does she feed herself? Those she helps give her what she needs, and if there is no one to help, so she can be offered food by them, then others who have enough offer some of theirs, so Nissel will be well fed and ready to help us. You see? Those she helps pay her with tava bread, but it's the same thing, almost as they do here with money. But she specializes in a service to the village. Everyone helps a little, so she will be there for the village when there is need of her. Here, that's called a tax, when everyone pays a little toward the good of the group, to help support those who work for all the people. Is this how you get your food? The people all give for you? Like we do when you come to make trouble for us? She was relieved that for the first time he didn't say it with enmity. Enmity. Yes. Chanelin eyed empty second floor windows as they walked on among buildings that were becoming larger and more ornate. The double iron strapped hinge doors to an end on their left were broken in, and tables, chairs, pots, dishes, and linen embroidered with red roses, apparently to echo the inn's name, the Red Rose, had been thrown open on the street, where they were half covered over with the snow. Through the empty doorway, he could see the body of an apron-clad kitchen boy sprawled on the floor, his eyes staring up at the ceiling, frozen with the terror of his last vision. He couldn't have been over 12. But that is just the hunters and Nissel, Chanelin added after some thought. Others of us do not do this specializing. Everyone does to some degree. The women bake the tava bread, the men make the weapons. Nature is that way too. Some plants grow where it is wet, some where it is dry. Some animals eat grass, some leaves, some bugs, and some other animals. Everything plays its part. Women have the babies, and men. She halted, fist at her sides, staring at the countless bodies fallen all around her. She swept her arm out. And men, it would seem, are here to kill everything. You see, Chanelin, women's specialty is to bring forth life, and men's specialty is to take it away. Let's see here. Okay, I'm going to skip the last few paragraphs because it goes over some scenes of the dead. The next time we come back to her, we're also going to be skipping a few parts here and there. Basically, everybody in that city was killed. Some of them had a lot worse things done before they were killed. So, yeah, that's where we're going to leave it. And the only other thing that is said is Chanelin says that not all men are like that. He would slit the throat of any man that did something like that, which, makes him a really good man. So that is the end of story time for tonight, guys. You guys, I want you to have a nice night. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. Do your research. If you can't be good at it. If you have any problems, let me know. If you want to talk to me, message me here for friends, or message me on TikTok if we're friends. Message me on Instagram if we're not. If you have another place to get a hold of me, then by all means get a hold of me. That one's not hard. But you guys have a nice night. We love you and try and stay out of trouble. All right. Bye, guys.